All right. So thank you everyone for coming in. So today we are going to be talking about how to discover your site's analytics. And as a rough outline, we're going to briefly cover what we use to produce your analytics reports, which is Google Data Studio. What is a Data Studio report? How to access your analytics report. And then we're going to follow up with a breakdown of what your report covers. And it's a very step-by-step process. And this covers information from your top search pages to demographics to people pages and all kinds of other information. And then lastly, we're going to cover some really brief resources, some of which cover analytics and some are kind of more general Drupal related things. So let's get started. What is Google Data Studio? It's the tool that ASC Web Services uses to create and share your website's analytic reports. Basically, we use this tool to convert data from your website into these customizable reports and dashboards. But we mostly focus on the report side rather than the dashboard side, since dashboard is kind of more the general layout of your report, whereas the actual report itself is basically what is being tracked on the website. And we generally use this option because it's just really great for creating these kind of reports, and they're easy to share with our users. So a report is basically just a multi-page document that covers different parts of your website and tracks how certain pages are doing compared to others. And it's also tracking all kinds of different data. Since each website is different, each report is tailored to each website. So it's not going to be tracking every single kind of page, since, for example, some departments have different web pages about undergraduate and graduate. Some might just have like a graduate page. So it's going to probably tend towards following information from that, while others also might be specifically more research-based, more journals, and instead might be tracking information on there. So some pages will have things like alumni or like a donors page. And because of that, it's going to be tracking all kinds of different stuff. Also, I should add that everything a report tracks, it tracks data over the past 365 days. So for example, if you're checking something on July 20th, then it's going to be tracking data since July 20th of last year up until July 20th of this year. So to actually get the ball rolling on how to access your reports, you just need to either contact us directly. You could email me, or you could file a ticket, which we kind of do encourage you do this instead on our website, just because it's kind of easier to kind of keep track of requests and stuff like that, rather than something ending up lost or forgotten in an inbox. So this way you can kind of contact us for tickets and to receive like a consultation on your analytics reports, which as Gabe mentioned before I started to record this, we can actually then kind of go on from there and talk about things like SEO, see what's kind of working for your website compared to say someone else's, and see if we can kind of get it to perform a bit better in terms of traffic. And like I said, I would just recommend creating a ticket on our website, just so nothing's getting lost in inboxes or anything like that. So here's like a really short overview of what the report details. If you look on the right, you'll see the structure of each report. This is kind of where reports will tend to be mostly the same. Reports kind of cover each of these categories, from the report summary to top performing pages, what is being searched up to find your pages on Google, where your traffic is coming from, if it's coming from Facebook or social media or a browser, things like that, and some other information that we're going to be covering. So we're going to kind of be going through a little bit of each page, what's being covered. I'm using the School of Communication as our example. They were kind enough to agreed to let me use this. So we're going to see some things that might not be on your website and some things that you'll probably see that are similar. So like I said before, each report is very tailored to each website. So it's all going to be a little bit different. And before I forget to, it's really, really important to have a properly worded URL in terms of tracking. Otherwise, you might have pages that end up blank because it's not pulling from a properly constructed URL. If that does become an issue, you can reach out to us and we can get about fixing that and making sure that your website's data is being tracked. So here's just a brief report summary. I will also get to any questions after the presentation. So that way I'm not going to forget anyone. If you want, you can type your questions out in the chat. And then after this is done, I can kind of get down to each. So that said, here is the report summary. As you'd imagine, it just provides a summary overview of your website's analytics data. It tracks over 365 days of data. And this generally provides you a pretty good idea of information about sessions, users, device access, and how that is performing compared to the previous 365 days ago. So this first top page visit, this is covering your highest traffic pages. So typically it's going to be pretty common for your landing pages, the home pages to be your most visited one. Typically in the URL that always just ends with like a backslash. So that's typically indicating the home page here. But this pretty much tracks all your top pages, landing pages, and exit pages, which are web pages where users typically exit the website, they X out or something like that. And this is a little bit of a reminder, not everyone's going to have the same kind of page, which would be like undergrad, alumni, donors, anything like that. So this is where the report covers your Google search terms. And this is basically mostly what are they typing to find your web page. So this tracks everything from your top search terms to clicks, impressions, sites, CTR. It provides you kind of like a visual breakdown of your browsers, where they're coming from. Most of the time it's going to be Google. You might see some other ones that might seem a little odd to you. So for example, School of Comm, most people are looking up School of Communications, and it looks like it's a little hard to tell from the text here, but it looks like someone in particular, probably like a people page, is being Googled. Ohio State Communication, OSU Communication, and it kind of goes on down from there. A lot of people will typically sometimes find your site just by Googling a member of your faculty. And this tends to be pretty common, someone who's really well known or pretty prominent in a school. So demographics, this is the first demographics page that we will typically look at. So this breaks down everything from gender to age, day of the week that you're being searched, time of day, what browser people are using, and their operating system. So for School of Comm, it looks like there is a majority female audience coming in. Typically, it's definitely on the younger side, from ages, I think here, 18 to 24, and then it goes on to 25 to 34, and it kind of goes down from there. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays are typically the highest traffic of days. Later in the day, around the afternoon, early afternoon to noon. A lot of folks just using Chrome, Safari, and a lot of Apple users, iOS, Windows, kind of what we would expect from that. So the second demographics page is where we're kind of looking where the user's coming from in the world. You typically get this little visual breakdown. Obviously, we're getting the majority of sessions from the United States. We do get a lot of traffic from China, India, and we also can kind of see what cities they're coming from too. So Columbus, Cleveland, New York, very heavily American audience. And we do get some Chinese traffic as well. You might notice some anomalies here and there due to bot spam, which is kind of a reoccurring issue we get. So sometimes that can throw off some of the data that we get. That's just something to kind of keep in mind in the future if something looks a little unusual to you. So this is our second top page. And this kind of breaks things down more specifically by category. So for example, this breaks it down based on our top undergraduate and graduate pages at the School of Communication. A lot of journalism, strategic communication, which was my major actually when I was a comm student, minors, things like that, scheduling appointments. Whereas on the graduate page, we see a lot of folks coming in for PhD, Master of Arts, graduate program, things that you would also kind of expect from those kinds of pages. And it looks like actually the PhD in communications is actually not as performing as well as it was last year. And given the fact it's only 3% though, that might not be super significant. That's something that we could talk about and hash out in a consultation session. So our third top page in this report for the School of Comm, this is kind of covering, more general pages like about research, diversity, employment opportunities seems to be like the biggest one in terms of the about page at the School of Comm, followed by like purchases, which is not super doing too well here. We have our research pages, which our communication research experience program has a lot of traffic coming in. These are pages that are doing a lot better compared to they were last year. And a reason for that could be their website could have migrated from the older Drupal 7 platform to the Drupal 9 platform, which is why we're seeing such huge like performance tracking, like 464%. It's something that you're probably not going to see on a typical website. So a lot that could be one reason. There's all kinds of different possibilities for why we see huge ticks in performances compared to something like a more average performing, like the fact that the communication research experience program is actually only doing 30% better than it was. So our fourth people page, this is just covering our like courses and alumni pages. And again, I know I'm probably sounding like a bit of a broken record here. Your website may or may not have a courses page. It might not have a top alumni page. So these kind of pages in your reports are going to be probably pretty different for each one. Hence the whole, they're tailored specifically for your site bit. So it looks like here in the top courses pages, the persuasive communication classes tends to be pretty popular unless it's also having some other kind of reason for why it's getting this much boost in performance. Principles of effective public speaking, communication in society, sports media, those kind of courses tend to be pretty interesting to folks. Top alumni pages, the advancement board is clearly doing pretty well. This is probably like a much smaller section though of the site. Our fifth part, and I think this should be the last one for this specific category, your top performing pages. This is covering more news and event content types. So how well are those items doing on your website? Are they drawing traffic like you would expect them to or want to? So news, we can see Grizzard's study on people using entertainment is doing pretty well. Bushman impact on violent video games is another one in the news stories. For news stories in particular, if that's something that you would like to cover in a consultation session for your analytics, that's something I can be happy to help you out with, mostly because there tends to be certain trends in news stories that you can kind of detect patterns in. And last down here, we can see like the event content types. So typically the things that we can see and kind of expect to be doing pretty well are scholarship application things, stuff like that. So this part of your report is covering your top people pages, which typically will attract quite a bit of traffic to your site. This is especially true if it's someone who's like a very well-known faculty member in their field. So we can see people like Brad Bushman, some very familiar names here, Jesse Fox, Lanier Holt, who was actually one of my instructors. So I'm definitely not surprised he's trending here. Top 3 for the School of Comm. And just like all the other pages, this is tracking sessions and the performance over 365 days, which our top 3 people are doing quite a bit better than they were last year, which is really good to see. It is very helpful to actually kind of cover people pages just to see what certain pages are doing that's better than others. So sometimes it's not just reputation. Sometimes it could just be what content is actually on someone's people page. That could be attracting traffic or using SEO to their advantage. So this section of the report, and it should be the last one, this is what is covering, your social media referrals. So what websites and platforms are visitors finding your website through? And this tracks pretty much just referrals by sessions and referrals by devices. So for example, for the School of Comm, most people are actually coming through here in terms of social media, which would be everything except Google, everything that's not essentially a web browser or a search engine. So for School of Comm, it looks like a lot of people are coming from Twitter here, which is really interesting. But it also makes sense because the School of Comm really makes heavy use of Twitter to draw attention and traffic to their site. Others tends to be anything that's just not listed here, for example. Quite a few folks are coming in from LinkedIn, which is pretty significant as well. And it kind of goes on down from there. Device is just basically what are they using to actually access your website? And this can actually be pretty useful to know, especially if you are looking to kind of like redesign the layout of your website. So for some folks, they might take an approach compared to another one called Mobile in Mind, which typically prioritizes, the difference is that they kind of prioritize, the mobile experience versus say your laptop or a desktop experience. Oh, I should also note too, for the School of Comm specifically, it looks like another significant traffic is actually coming from Facebook as well. That's not necessarily listed on this pie chart above here. And then we start to see folks coming in from LinkedIn, people less so coming from YouTube, Reddit, and so on and so forth there. And this bottom page here, the social referring pages, that's typically covering what URL people are landing on when they're coming from a place like Twitter or Facebook, LinkedIn. So that basically kind of covers each part of the report. So what we look for in a report, these are the things that kind of stand out to us. Anything that's like performing really, really well or getting a lot of traffic, or there's something that's kind of unusual that we see in a report, things that stand out, something that we might want to investigate as to why we're seeing in a report. Again, because this is the School of Comm, we can obviously expect a lot of folks from the United States, but those are things that we kind of look for. What platform do we see is performing pretty well, which, like we covered in the previous section, we see Twitter is kind of like the first thing that most people are kind of using other than Google to find the School of Comm's website. And we typically also look for session times, how long people are staying, what cities they're coming from, platforms, devices, things like that we mentioned previously. And those kind of help you determine what kind of approach should you be taking out to your website's design. Should you be looking at a more mobile in mind approach, or do you kind of want to go the more mobile first, which kind of prioritizes your mobile experience? So last but not least, if you want to find out a little bit more about your analytics and want something as a reference, then the ASC Web Services knowledge base is definitely the route to go. I would strongly encourage that you check that out because we're always adding more content on there. And the more feedback you provide on that, we can use that to kind of build this and provide you a better experience on that front. Any information about resources, things like that you would like, you can always let us know. And I can work to get that onto the Web Services knowledge base. And last but not least, again, is the Drupal standard sites team, which is something I've been trying to kind of push a bit more. That way we can have a little bit more direct communication, not just with the web services team, me and Ava specifically, but rather also your fellow content editors and managers, folks who might be spending a little bit more time working on Drupal, just for ideas, just to share resources, things like that. And I can provide links to both of these after this is done.